Ma'am, I need you to answer the question, who exactly gave your association permission to construct that recreational facility on Mr. Thorne's private property? The question hung in the dry, dusty air like a guillotine blade waiting to drop. Deputy Sheriff Higgins didn't shout it. He didn't need to, because his voice had that low, gravelly timbre of a man who had seen everything and was impressed by nothing. Patricia Vance, the self-appointed queen bee of Oak Ridge Heights who had ruled our neighborhood with an iron fist and a terrifyingly organized binder for nearly 3 decades, actually stopped breathing. I watched the color drain from her face, turning her that specific shade of pale usually reserved for fish bellies and people realizing they've just stepped on a landmine. The massive yellow excavator, a Caterpillar 336, killed its engine mid-swing, the sudden silence deafening, leaving the bucket hovering just inches from my shattered trellises, hydraulic fluid dripping onto the soil like the saliva of a hungry beast. Half of my Tempranillo crop was gone. 18 months of sweat, tears, and therapy grinded into purple sludge across the pavement. And the worst part was that Sarah's ashes were scattered between those rows, mixed into the very earth that was now being churned up by heavy machinery. The air tasted like diesel fumes and heartbreak. Patricia thought she was teaching me a lesson about the pecking order in her little suburban kingdom. She thought she was crushing a bug, but what she didn't realize was that she had just handed me a $250,000 lawsuit on a silver platter because the community center she had been bragging about for years, the crown jewel of her administration, was built entirely, and I mean entirely, on my land. She never checked the deed, and karma, let me tell you, tastes a lot like crushed grapes and absolute, unadulterated vengeance. My name is Elias Thorne, and 3 years ago, I was a man looking for a place to die quietly. After 20 years in the Army Corps of Engineers, blowing up bridges and building forward operating bases in places you can't find on a map, I came home to nothing. Sarah, my wife, my compass, the only person who could quiet the noise in my head, lost her war with ovarian cancer, and the house we shared felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum. That's how I ended up here in Oak Ridge Heights, a planned community just outside Austin, Texas, where the grass is measured with rulers and the smiles never quite reach the eyes. I bought a weird, L-shaped plot of land, about 3 acres, a leftover slice of earth from a surveying mistake back in the 60s that nobody wanted, but Sarah had always talked about the hill country, about vineyards and sunsets, so I decided to build her dream for her, even if she wasn't there to see it. It took me 1.5 years of backbreaking labor, soil preparation, custom drip irrigation systems, and planting premium Tempranillo and Viognier varietals, treating every vine like a soldier under my command. I scattered her ashes between the rows so she could be part of the harvest, and every cluster of grapes was a living, breathing memorial to the woman who saved my life. Then, Patricia Vance rolled into my paradise like a Panzer tank in a floral blouse. Picture your worst nightmare of a homeowner association president. Give her a real estate license, a superiority complex the size of Texas, and multiply it by 27 years of unchecked authority. Patricia lived in the biggest house on the hill, drove a pristine white Mercedes G-Wagon, and treated the neighborhood like her personal dollhouse. Her specialty wasn't just enforcement, it was erasure, making undesirable elements disappear faster than a magician's coin. There was Mrs. Gable, an 80-year-old widow who got hit with 16 violations in a year for excessive garden ornamentation because she had 3 ceramic frogs, or the Miller family whose autistic son made unauthorized vocalizations in his own backyard. The pattern was brutal and efficient. Harass them until they break, force them to sell, and then Patricia would swoop in with her real estate license to sell the property to the right kind of people. The certified letter hit my mailbox on a Tuesday, the steam from my black coffee fogging up the glass as I read the words that declared war on my grief. Agricultural use violation. Section 8.4. No commercial farming operations permitted. Daily fine set at $750. Cease and desist immediately or face forced removal. The morning air was filled with the rhythmic CHK of my sprinklers, a sound that had become my heartbeat, my meditation, and now she wanted to silence it. I called her office, trying to be diplomatic, trying to be the calm, rational officer I was trained to be. Mrs. Vance, this isn't a commercial farm. I don't sell the wine. It's a memorial for my late wife, it's landscaping. Her voice on the other end was cold enough to freeze whiskey. Mr. Thorne, I don't care if it's a shrine to the Virgin Mary. Agriculture lowers property values and attracts rodents and elements we don't want in Oak Ridge. You have 2 weeks to bulldoze it, or we will do it for you and bill you for the pleasure. The wrong elements. The smell of fertilizer and grape leaves mixed with the sudden, sharp scent of my own adrenaline. 20 years of military training didn't just vanish, it kicked into gear. Analyze the threat. Identify the weakness. Dismantle the structure. Patricia thought she was dealing with just another grieving widower she could steamroll. She didn't know I specialized in structural demolition, and she had no idea that her entire empire was built on a foundation of sand. I went out to the vines, plucked a single grape that was weeks away from harvest, and tasted it, sweet, complex, with a thick skin, just like Sarah. But here is the thing about combat engineers. We don't just blow things up, we find the one critical load-bearing beam that holds the whole building up, and I had just found hers. While Patricia was busy measuring the length of people's grass with a laser level and issuing fines for trash cans left out 10 minutes too long, she had gotten lazy about the one thing that actually matters in real estate, the paperwork. 27 years of acting like a god had made her forget to check if she actually owned the heavens. I spent the next morning spreading out every single document from my closing, the original deed, the survey maps from 1968, the title insurance, the boring stuff most people shove in a drawer and forget until they die. But engineers don't ignore blueprints. That's when I saw it, a tiny, jagged line on the survey map that didn't match the current fence line. I picked up the phone and dialed the Travis County Clerk's office. Hi, I need a deep dive. I need every survey on record for the Oak Ridge development going back to the original cattle ranch petition. The clerk sighed. Sir, that's going to take days and it's going to cost you. I've got time, I said, watching Patricia's Mercedes cruise past my house like a shark patrolling a reef. I have all the time in the world. Because here is the secret about tyrants. They assume their power is absolute. They never imagine that someone will actually check their math. And after nearly 3 decades of terrorizing this neighborhood, Patricia had forgotten the golden rule of land ownership. It doesn't matter what you think you own, it matters what the county says you own. The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday night at the community center, that beautiful, sprawling building with the vaulted ceilings and the limestone fireplace, where Patricia held court. She called it an emergency session regarding agricultural blight, which was basically code for the public execution of Elias Thorne. I walked into that room knowing I was walking into an ambush. She had stacked the deck, filling the seats with her cronies, Bob Ewell and Linda Starch, people who nodded at everything she said like bobbleheads on a dashboard. The AC was humming, and the smell of stale coffee and bureaucratic fear was thick in the air. Patricia fired up her projector, the fan whirring like a drone, and displayed photos of my vineyard on the big screen. They were beautiful shots, honestly, rows of healthy, vibrant vines, but she made them look like crime scene photos. We are here to address a cancer in our community, she began, her voice dripping with fake concern. This commercial operation brings pests, chemicals, and lowers the aesthetic value of our homes. Benji Miller, a young guy who had just been elected treasurer and looked like he regretted every life choice that led him to this room, raised his hand. Patricia, isn't this just gardening? Mrs. Gable grows tomatoes. How is this different? She snapped her head toward him like a cobra. Scale and intent, Benji. Mr. Thorne clearly intends to profit, which is a violation of the covenants. I stood up, feeling the ghost of my drill sergeant straightening my spine. I have never sold a single grape. This is for my wife. Patricia didn't even blink. Intent is irrelevant when the aesthetics are this offensive. The vote was 4-1. Only Benji voted no, looking at me with an apology written all over his face. As the residents shuffled out, muttering about property values, Benji bumped into me near the door and slipped a folded piece of paper into my hand. Call me, he whispered, looking over his shoulder to make sure Patricia wasn't watching. There are numbers in the books that don't add up. But first, I had my own reconnaissance to do. Friday morning, I was at the county office, breathing in the smell of old paper and dust mites. When the clerk handed me the 1968 survey, it was like someone handed me a loaded weapon. Buried in the legal description of my property was a 50-foot utility easement that ran directly through what the HOA claimed was their common area. But that wasn't the bombshell. The bombshell was that the community center, the pool deck, the storage shed, and 12 parking spaces were built across the boundary line. They were sitting on my land. I called Audrey Liu, a real estate attorney Benji recommended. She was expensive, sharp as a tack, and hated HOAs with a burning passion. When I showed her the maps, she actually laughed, a terrifying, joyful sound. Elias, this isn't just a trespass. This is unjust enrichment. This is gross negligence. They have been operating a business on your property for 30 years. We can burn them to the ground. But I held up a hand. Not yet. I don't want a settlement. I want her to expose herself. Patricia didn't take my silence for submission. She took it for weakness. She escalated. Monday, I got a fine for sprinklers operating outside designated hours. Tuesday, improperly stored hose. Wednesday, mailbox paint chipping. She was driving by my house 4 times a day, slowing down, taking notes. But 2 can play at that game. I installed high-definition cameras with night vision and directional microphones. I caught her creeping onto my property at 2 a.m., stepping over the property line to take photos of my vines, trespassing to manufacture evidence. Then Benji dropped the other shoe. We met at a diner 3 towns over so we wouldn't be seen. He slid a stack of invoices across the sticky table. Patricia's husband runs a landscaping company called Green Horizon. Look at the payouts. I scanned the columns. $50,000 for tree trimming. $30,000 for irrigation repair. No competitive bidding. No board approval records. She was using the HOA funds as her personal piggy bank, funneling our dues into her husband's pocket. And the best part? One of the invoices was for irrigation repair on the north berm. The north berm was on my property. She used HOA money to fix land that she didn't know I owned. It was a perfect storm of corruption. Nepotism, fraud, trespassing. But she wasn't done. She sent a special assessment of $3,500 for soil remediation, claiming my vines damaged the groundwater. It was a lie, a fabrication to bankrupt me. She started a whisper campaign at the grocery store, telling neighbors I was mentally unstable, a dangerous veteran with PTSD who was hoarding chemicals. People I used to wave to started crossing the street to avoid me. It hurt, I won't lie. It felt like being back in a war zone where the enemy doesn't wear a uniform. But Patricia made one fatal error. She got impatient. She wanted a spectacle. She scheduled the demolition for Tuesday morning, hiring a private contractor to rip out my vines. She wanted to stream it live on the neighborhood Facebook page, a public warning to anyone else who dared to defy her. I told Audrey, prepare the papers. The injunction, the civil suit, the criminal fraud referral. But do not serve them yet. She looked at me like I was crazy. Why? We can stop this now. I looked out the window at the roses I planted for Sarah. Because I want her to break the ground. I want her to commit a felony on camera, in front of witnesses, on land she stole. I want there to be no coming back from this. The night before the demolition, my cameras caught Patricia walking into my vineyard with a spray bottle. She wasn't just going to dig them up. She wanted to make sure they died. She sprayed herbicide on the front rows, the toxic smell drifting into my bedroom window. I watched on the monitor, my hands shaking, not with fear, but with the restraint it took not to go out there. I let her do it. I let her poison the earth because every spray was another nail in her coffin. She even filed a police report that morning, claiming I had threatened her, trying to preemptively cover her tracks. Deputy Higgins called me, skeptical. I told him, just come tomorrow morning, Sheriff, and bring handcuffs. Tuesday morning broke with the roar of diesel engines shattering the peace of the cul-de-sac. Mike, the dozer Kowalski, a man who looked like he ate bricks for breakfast, rolled that massive caterpillar down the street, the treads chewing up the asphalt. Patricia was there in her white pantsuit, looking like the cat who ate the canary in the birdcage. She had Bobule with her, and she was holding her phone up, live streaming to the neighborhood group. Finally, cleaning up our community, she narrated to her phone, a manic glint in her eyes. This is what happens when you don't follow the rules. I ran out in my bathrobe, giving the performance of a lifetime. Please, you can't do this. Just give me a week to harvest. It was bait, and she swallowed it whole. Mr. Thorne, your time is up. Mike, tear it down. The bucket slammed into the earth. The sound of snapping wood and tearing roots was sickening, like bones breaking. My neighbors were watching from their porches, horrified. Mrs. Gable was crying. Benji was filming on his phone. Patricia was beaming. She destroyed about 20% of the vineyard, the purple juice of unripened grapes staining the driveway like blood before the blue and red lights flashed against the morning sun. Deputy Higgins stepped out of his cruiser, hitching up his belt. The machine stopped. Patricia marched over to him, confident, arrogant. "Sheriff, we are conducting authorized abatement of a nuisance property." Higgins ignored her and looked at me. "Is this it, Elias?" I nodded and handed him the manila envelope thick with 36 years of secrets. He opened it, scanned the certified survey, checked the tax records, and then looked at the community center looming behind us. That's when he asked the question, "Ma'am, who gave you permission to build that structure on Mr. Thorne's land?" The silence was absolute. Patricia stuttered, "Tage, that's common area. It's always been common area." Higgins shook his head. "According to the county and the tax assessor and the original deed, you are standing on Mr. Thorne's private property. The pool, the shed, and this entire building are trespassing structures. And you just ordered heavy machinery to destroy property on land you don't own." Then Audrey stepped out of her car like a Valkyrie in a pencil skirt. "We are also filing for immediate injunctive relief and damages for 30 years of unjust enrichment, totaling $300,000 in back rent and illegal use fees." Benji stepped forward then. "And Sheriff, I have records here showing Mrs. Vance has funneled $150,000 of HOA funds to her husband's company for work that was never bid on." The operator, Mike, jumped down from the cab. "Wait, she told me she had a court order. I ain't going down for this." He pulled out his phone. "She offered me cash under the table to rough up the land extra bad. I got the text right here." Patricia looked like she was having a stroke. She started screaming, "You can't do this. I am this community." Higgins spun her around and cuffed her. "You're under arrest for criminal mischief, trespassing, and fraud." As they put her in the car, I looked at the live stream she had left running on the hood of her car. 150 people were watching. I leaned in close to the phone. "Next time you want to destroy a man's memory of his wife, check the deed." The fallout was nuclear. Patricia faced felony charges and personal bankruptcy. The HOA was dissolved and reformed with Benji as president. The lawsuit settled for $250,000 plus a permanent easement that forced them to pay me rent for the community center for the next 99 years. I used the money to rebuild the vineyard, bigger and better. I named the first vintage Justice Reserve. But the best part? I turned the disputed land into a community garden. Mrs. Gable planted her tomatoes there. The Miller kid comes over to water the pumpkins. Sarah always said that the best wine comes from the vines that struggle the most. The roots have to dig deep through the rocks to find the water, and that struggle gives the grapes their character. Standing here now, watching the sun set over the repaired trellises, drinking a glass of wine that tastes like victory and peace, I think she was right. But it makes you wonder, where is the line between justice and revenge? Did I wait too long just to see her fall, or was the public destruction necessary to free the neighborhood from her grip? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and remember, check your deeds, folks. You never know what you might own.